स्वभावविहितान् यथा वर्णं यथाश्रमं वैराग्यरागोपादिभ्याम् अम्नातो भयलक्षणान्. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. At Maharaj Yudhishthira's inquiry, Bhishmadev first defined all the classifications of castes and orders of life in terms of the individual's qualifications. Then he systematically, in twofold divisions, described counteraction by detachment and interaction by attachment. So we'll do a little bit different today. We'll go through the purport, but I'll go bit by bit, and then we'll also show some slides reflecting what Srila Prabhupada is explaining here. Because actually this is very, very profound. So Yudhishthira has gone to Bhishmadev. Remember what we talked about yesterday. Yudhishthira was bewildered. He was not sure. Should he continue on as the king? Should he take the throne? Should he be the ruler? He was feeling so bad about all the warfare and all the bloodshed that had taken place. So Krishna told Yudhishthira, go to Bhishma, because Bhishma, he knows dharma. It's explained. Swayambhur Narada Sambhur Kumara Kapilo Manur Pralado Janako Bhishmo Balirveya Shikirveyam. Different people know the secrets of bhakti or the secrets of dharma, because the secrets of dharma are not just understood in scripture, they're embodied in personalities. This morning we were reading that you have to learn from the book of Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. Therefore, Pralado, Janako, Bhishmo, Bhishma, Pralad, Janak, these are the great Mahajans of our time. And if you want to know Dharmasya Tattvam, if you want to know the secrets of devotion or dharma, Nihitam Guhayam, they're hidden within the hearts of the great devotees. Therefore, Mahajano Yena Gata Sapantha. Therefore, you have to follow the pantha, the path, the road traversed by the great devotees. So, yeah, Krishna told you this, that go to Bhishma, he'll tell you everything. So now Bhishma is about to begin his elucidation of dharma. And Bhishma Dev's got lots to say about dharma. Dharma doesn't just mean religion, dharma doesn't just mean purpose, dharma doesn't just mean duties, dharma means the best way to live. So now Bhishma Dev is going to tell about the best way to live. And actually in this purport, Srila Prabhupada basically summarizes the whole Varnashram system. In the first part, he explains what is Varnashram, why does Varnashram exist, and then he goes on to explain what is the basis of Varnashram. Then he goes on, third thing to explain is all the qualities of the Varnas, and then the fourth thing is he explains all the qualities of the ashrams. So let's see, maybe we'll not get through everything, but we'll see how far we go. So I'm going to read the first part of the purport, and then I want you to reflect here. So this is Srila Prabhupada's first part of the purport, as he begins to explain how Bhishma Dev's elucidating on Varnashram. Purport. The conception of 4 castes and 4 orders of life as planned by the Lord himself, Bhagavad Gita 4.13, is to accelerate transcendental qualities of the individual person so that he may gradually realize his spiritual identity and thus act accordingly to get free from material bondage or condition or life. In almost all the Puranas, the subject matter is described in the same spirit, and so also in the Mahabharata, it is more elaborately described by Bhishma Dev in the Shanti Parva, beginning from the 60th chapter. So now, here in this first paragraph, Prabhupada is already describing what is the goal of Varnashram. And Prabhupada says very clearly that the goal of Varnashram is to accelerate the transcendental qualities of the living being so that ultimately they can attain the goal of life. So here we go. This is the goal of Varnashram. Why do we have this system? Because it helps for social organization, it helps for social integration, but more than that, and more importantly than that, it's meant for the ultimate spiritual upliftment of the living being. Srila Prabhupada here quotes, what is the basis by which one is in a certain varna or certain ashram? Chatur varnyam maya shrishtam, guna karma. Guna and karma, it depends on your qualities and your activities. That is the basis. And what happens is that when you join and you accept a certain varna or ashram, then you connect all of that to Krishna. Therefore it becomes yoga, karma yoga. Sometimes people say, yes, doing my work and taking care of my family is my worship to God. No. It's not just that by doing your job and taking care of your family that's karma yoga. No. If you do your job, you take care of your family, and you consciously then dedicate it and connect it and integrate it in God consciousness, then it's karma yoga. Otherwise, it's just karma. Therefore, the goal of Varnashram is to connect everything. So then you function in your Varna, karma yoga, and ultimately that awakens bhakti yoga. Because in Bhagavatam it says, if your karma doesn't incorporate dharma, if your dharma doesn't lead to vairagya, and if vairagya doesn't lead to seva, then ultimately it's a waste of time. So karma yoga, then coming up to bhakti yoga. And who is considered the highest in the original authentic Varnashram system? The self-realized soul. Because ultimately what does Mahaprabhu say? Na ham vipro, na cha narapatir, na pi vaisho, na sudra. I'm not any of these things. Ultimately, Gopi Bhartu Padakamalayur, Das Das, I'm just a servant. And who's eligible for that highest position? Everyone. And what is the spiritual contribution? As Prabhupada mentions here, it's meant to uplift everyone. So this is it's logical system given by Krishna and implemented therefore in society. But then what happens over time is when people don't understand what Prabhupada has written here in the first paragraph, then what happens is that this original system, it degrades into materialistic Varnashram. So materialistic Varnashram, the goal then becomes skewed. Can you see? Originally the goal was ultimately spiritual advancement. But in materialistic Varnashram, or what we call today the modern day caste system, it all becomes about this world. The goal of the other world starts to get lost, it starts to fade, it starts to disappear into the background. And what happens is that the basis is lost. It's not now longer about guna and karma, it's all about janma. So that if you're born in a Brahmin family, then you are Brahmin. If you have that kind of upbringing. And what are the activities in materialistic Varnashram? Bhakti or love or devotion as the cherished goal, that is lost. And it's just all about piety and activity. Maybe some yoga, maybe some dedication to the Lord. But what? For what purpose? Material gain. Yeah, I'll dedicate it to God so that I can get more back. This is what happens in materialistic Varnashram. And who's considered the highest? The Brahmin. Yes, we were talking the other day that one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples was in Vrindavan, and he went to a Vrindavan temple, and as he was bowing down, the Pujari said to him, I bless you that in your next life you'll become a Brahmana. And he came back and told Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, go back and tell him, in your next life, we bless you, you become part of the Krishna consciousness movement. Because they have a conception that the Brahmana is the highest. Therefore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur went on a mission, a crusade, to show that Vaishnavas supersede Brahmanas. Because Brahmana is still within the system of the material world. And who can become the so-called highest, which is the Brahmana? Those who are born in Brahmana families. And what is the spiritual contribution? The bhakti is lost, but there's still some benefit. Because in materialistic Varnashram, at least there's some sense of connection to what is an originally authentic teaching, and maybe along the line someone will become a little humble and realize, maybe I'm not a Brahmana. What is actually a Brahmana? And then maybe they will advance. So can you see how an original system begins to slide? And then what happens is the natural psychology of society is that when something goes bad, then just throw the whole thing out completely. In English they say, throw the baby out with the bathwater. So then when people see this materialistic Varnashram, then they say, out with this, out with classification, and just let everyone be equal, egalitarian society. So then what happens is this. You take out all the regulation of Shastra, but the irony is Varnashram continues. But now it's spontaneous, it's not guided by anything. Because you can't have a society without division. You can't have a society without classification. Otherwise, how can it go on? So then what happens is that when we take out Shri Radha Landanishwara ki, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki, Shri Nitai ki jai. When we take out all of the system and the regulation around it, then the goal just becomes preserving order in society, and the wealthy and the influential, they become the most powerful. They dictate how everything goes on. And the activity now is not even piety, it's just vikarma, it's whatever is good for material enjoyment. And if it follows Shastra or not, there's no conception of Shastra. And who is considered the highest? Those who are rich, those who are powerful, those who are popular, because they carry the influence. And what is the spiritual contribution? Basically, there is none. So the fact of the matter is, you can't take Varnashram out of the world. It will go on. Because society has to be class, society has to be divided, because otherwise there are different people and there are different needs. Because there are different people and there are different needs, naturally there has to be division of labor. But the problem is the original science and the basis of it is being lost. And therefore this is the first thing that we have to teach the world, that there is a need to understand that people are different and that there are different needs in society, and there's a way in which those can all be integrated within a culture of respect, so that materially and spiritually there is great gain. So this is just the basis first of what Bhishma Dev is describing to Yudhishthira. Before I go on, does anyone have any question on anything here? Yeah, Kavipu.
So you said about like karma yogi, and it's not enough that he takes care of his family and does his job. You said that it's not enough that he takes care of his family and does his job, but he has to be integrated. But how much integration would he have to do to call it karma yoga?
Yeah. So therefore, later on Srila Prabhupada will explain that for householders, like say for example, he said every ashram has a defect in this age. One of the defects of the brahmachari ashram is that they're unclean. Not in Soho. The defects of the vanaprasthas in Kali Yuga is that they don't go to the forest. They just stay in family life. Look, now children are grown up. Look after the grandchildren. Oh, now the grandchildren are grown up. Look after the great-grandchildren. They never leave family, just continue on. Defect of sannyasis in Kali Yuga is that they hoard money. Yeah, don't look at my phone. And the defect of grihastas in Kali Yuga is they don't give charity. So one of the basis of grihastas is that they must give charity. So one way in which very prominent way in which grihastas or those working is they must give, they must dedicate the fruits of their activities to brahmanas, to the movement, to the mission of Krishna consciousness. So that's one thing. But not just that, they're bringing up their children, great, but are you teaching your children about spiritual values? Then your parenting becomes spiritual parenting. So there's many ways in which a grihasta functions in this world and can work and can earn, but then has to do very, very specific things so it becomes spiritually centered. Otherwise it's not karma yoga. Yoga, yuj, means to connect. So how is your work connected to God? How is your family life connected to God? How are you connecting your social duties to God? Everything should be connected. And so if someone's just being dutiful but there's no connection, that's not going to give you spiritual realization. So what does Krishna say to Arjuna? Yat karoshi, yad ashnashi, yad juhoshi, dadashi yat tapasyasi kaunteya, mat kurushva, madarpanam. Do it. All the sacrifices, all the austerities as a offering to me. What does Krishna also say? Yagyartat karmano nyatra loko yam karma bandhana. Your work has to be done as a sacrifice for Vishnu. Otherwise, karma bandhana, that will just entangle you. So there's this kind of, especially in Hindu culture, there's this huge misunderstanding that if I'm dutiful, if I take care of my family, then I am being the most religious person in the world. No, that's a huge misunderstanding. That's not enough. There must be conscious connection. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah. Anyone else need any clarification on this? Yeah.
There's been a few times during Bhakti Surisha where people have come up to us and started to kind of chastise us for, supporting people being marginalized in India and things like this because of the modern caste system.
Yeah.
What's a way where we can kind of, without having to show them a presentation or give them a lecture to listen to, what's a way that we can explain that and remove their misconception, without having like a debate or argument, or what's something we can explain? Or is it even worth it to do that, or should we just leave them with that misconception? What do you think?
Yeah, of course we should try to the extent that someone is open to explain to them. The basic point is that in Kali Yuga, everything becomes corrupted. It's not just the caste system becomes corrupted, politics becomes corrupted, the way business is done becomes corrupted, relationships become corrupted, everything becomes corrupted. So if people say, well, we don't need the caste system because it's been corrupted now, and therefore just out with that, forget that, then on that logic we would also say out with all the politicians, out with all the political parties, because they're shown to be corrupt every other day, maybe every day. Right? So it's not a good logic if someone says like, no, the caste system, that's been misused, that's very materialistic, it subjugates people, therefore just out with that completely. A more intelligent person will say, what's the original form of this? What's the pure form of this? And let's go back there. Not just to, if you have a diseased eye, then are you just going to pluck your eyes out? No, you're going to, because you want to use your eyes. So people, they use a different logic, like they're not applying the same logic. They wouldn't say like, let's just do away with all political parties, let's just have anarchy, like no political system, because the politicians are corrupt. No, they'll say, let's get the corrupt ones out, let's get proper ones in, and let's work with this, because we need this. Otherwise, how will society function? So again, it's just that point that we have to establish to people, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So we have to tell them, yes, we agree with you, it's corrupt. But does that mean the original form is not empowering, elevating? It is. Anything else on this? Yeah.
Doesn't it come to character building then? The fact that it's the fundamental is character and qualities. The fact that we don't have quality in our association, we don't have quality in our character, is where all the other things are degrading. So the focus is on character and quality, and eventually all the other goals will be aligned.
Yeah, therefore Prabhupada says, he says that the conception of 4 castes and 4 orders is to accelerate transcendental qualities of the individual person so that he may gradually realize his spiritual identity. So yeah, that's the point. That by functioning in this system, there's a sense of you have responsibilities, you have duties, you have to make sacrifices. In other words, you have to become a refined person. You have to understand how to serve, how to integrate, how to cooperate, how to coexist, and therefore you become a more refined person. But when you don't have that, then it's just a free-for-all. People don't actually... Therefore, why do we encourage people to be in an ashram? Like, be in one of the 4 ashrams. Why? Because when you're in an ashram, there's a sense of purification, there's a certain development, because you have to make sacrifice, you have to, you have to serve, and through that you develop your character. So yes, ultimately it's about character development. Yeah. Okay, let me continue on. So Srila Prabhupada here in the first paragraph has established why we need Varnashram and what is the basic basis of Varnashram. Then in the next paragraph he goes on to explain the basic qualities that everyone has to have in order for Varnashram to work. Right? So this is Srila Prabhupada's purport. The Varnashram Dharma is prescribed for the civilized human being just to train him to successfully terminate human life. Self-realization is distinguished from the life of the lower animals engaged in eating, sleeping, fearing and mating. Bhishma Deva advised for all human beings 9 qualifications. 1. Not to become angry. 2. Not to lie. 3. To equally distribute wealth. 4. To forgive. 5. To beget children only by one's legitimate wife. 6. To be pure in mind and hygienic in body. 7. Not to be inimical toward anyone. 8. To be simple. And 9. To support servants or subordinates. One cannot be called a civilized person without acquiring the above-mentioned preliminary qualities. Besides these, the brahmanas, the intelligent men, the administrative men, the mercantile community, and the laborer class must acquire special qualities in terms of occupational duties mentioned in all the Vedic scriptures. So let me just pause there. So now what Srila Prabhupada is explaining is that in order for Varnashram to work, there are layers of dharma. So if you go, the most basic layer of dharma in Varnashram is Manushya Dharma. And this Manushya Dharma is these 9 principles. In other words, in any society, if these 9 principles are not taught to everyone, it doesn't matter what Varna you are, it doesn't matter what ashram you are, you have to follow these just to be a civilized person. One time they asked Gandhi, what do you think of Western civilization? He said, I think it would be a good idea. Because civilization means it only begins when there's this baseline of Manushya Dharma. So these 9 qualities must be taught to everyone. Because if you look at these very, very closely, these 9 qualities that Bhishma Dev talks about, if you don't have these 9 qualities, you can't really have community in any sense. People can't really live together. People won't really be able to support each other in a mood of love and trust for everyone to elevate themselves. Because, not to lie, to equally distribute wealth, these are like basic things. But they don't happen in the world today. They say 99% of the world's wealth is owned by less than 1% of the world's population. If that statistic doesn't worry you, then I'm worried about you. That's crazy. You know, to forgive, there's no community, there's no cohesion without forgiveness. To beget children only one by one's legitimate wife. Why was Arjun so scared about fighting in the Kurukshetra war? Adharma bhibavat Krishna pradyu shanti kula striya strishu dushta shuvarshneya jayate varna shankara. Because when the ladies are exploited, then, you know, illegitimate children come about, and that Varna Shankara creates extreme chaos in society. So this is the first thing, that Manusya Dharma must be taught. So in our communities, in our groups, we often talk about other types of Dharma, but the basis is these 9 things have to be taught again and again in a very deep way. And then on top of that, there is then Swadharma. So Manusya Dharma is like universal. Everyone must follow this Manusya Dharma. But then there is Swadharma. Everyone has a different body, everyone has a different mind, everyone has different abilities and a different disposition, and therefore everyone has to find their own Swadharma. They have to find which Varna, which ashram is most suitable for them to then continue their spiritual development. And now in the purport, Prabhupada will basically explain what are the qualities of the Varnas and what are the qualities of the ashramas. And therefore Swadharma built upon Manusya Dharma works. But Dharmas Fanustita Pumsham Vishvakshena Kathashuya Notpadayed Yadi Ratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam. It doesn't end at Swadharma, because the ultimate point of Swadharma is to develop Rati or Raga or love and affection for the Supreme Lord, because higher than Swadharma or more ultimate than that is Sanatan Dharma. Ultimately, the ultimate Dharma, Save Pumsham Paro Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Adhok Sajay, was the highest Dharma, the ultimate Dharma, the Pada Dharma, that Bhaktir Adhok Sajay, you have to develop love for Krishna, and that's the eternal duty. And so Varnashram is basically encompassing all 3 to allow us to have community, to then utilize our abilities, and then ultimately to awaken pure love for Krishna. And if we do these 3 things, then it can be said to be a successful human life. But now you see why there's no civilization, because people have no concept of Sanatan Dharma, neither they follow their Swadharma, neither they're even following basic Manusya Dharma of human civilization. Therefore, society is in absolute chaos. So here, when we're reading of these 9 qualities, we can understand it in this context. Any questions on this? Yeah, okay. Okay, so now what Srila Prabhupada will do in the purport is he's basically explaining what are the qualities of all the Varnas. So he begins with the Brahmanas, goes on to the Kshatriyas, then goes on to the Vaishyas, and then goes on to the Sudras. So it's quite long, but let me read the first bit and then we'll pause. So the Srila Prabhupada's purport continues. For the intelligent men, Brahmanas, controlling the senses is most essential qualification. It is the basis of morality. Sex indulgence, even with a legitimate wife, must also be controlled, and thereby family control will automatically follow. An intelligent man abuses his great qualifications if he does not follow the Vedic way of life. This means he must seriously make a study of the Vedic literatures, especially of the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. For learning Vedic knowledge, one must approach a person who is 100% engaged in devotional service. He must not do things which are forbidden in the Shastras. A person cannot be a teacher if he drinks or smokes. In the modern system of education, the teacher's academic qualification is taken into consideration without evaluation of his moral life. Therefore, the result of education is misuse of high intelligence in so many ways. So here it's interesting, Srila Prabhupada puts as the first qualification, most important qualification of a Brahmana, is that they must have controlled mind and controlled senses. In other words, they have to have character. Because if they teach, if they preach, if they try to educate the world but they have no character, then neither will they really be able to reach people's hearts, nor will they be able to grow people's faith. And in fact, they will do the very opposite. They will break people's faith. So Achar and Prachar, when Sanatana Goswami looks at Haridas Thakur, then he glorifies him. And he says, Achar Prachar Karaha Karaha Dui Karya Tumi Sarva Guru Tumi Jagatera Arya. You're the Jagatera Arya, you're the most advanced person in the world. Why? Because Dui Karya, you do two things, Achar and Prachar. You have good behavior, good character, and simultaneously you're able to preach and share and give. They say Prachar, if you take Achar out of Prachar, it simply becomes PR. That's what it is. Just talking, just some kind of presentation to the world, but lacking substance. Because they say, I can't hear what you're saying because your character is speaking so loud. So much of communication and so much of what we convey is our own character more than our words. And so here Srila Prabhupada says for a Brahmana, yes, control of the mind and senses and spotless character is extremely important. And then Prabhupada says for the Kshatriya, the member of the administrative class is especially advised to give charity and not to accept charity in any circumstances. Modern administrators raise subscriptions for some political functions, but never give charity to the citizens in any state function. It is just the reverse in the injunctions of Shastras. The administrative class must be well versed in the Shastras, but must not take to the profession of teachers. The administrators should never pretend to become non-violent and thereby go to hell. When Arjuna wanted to become a non-violent coward on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he was severely chastised by Lord Krishna. The Lord degraded Arjuna at that time to the status of an uncivilized man for his avowed acceptance of the cult of non-violence. The administrative class must be personally trained in military education. Cowards should not be elevated to the presidential throne by dint of numerical votes only. The monarchs were all chivalrous personalities, and therefore monarchy should be maintained provided the monarch is regularly trained in the occupational duties of a king. In fighting, the king or the president should never return home without being hurt by the enemy. The so-called king of today never visits the warfield. He is very much expert in artificially encouraging the fighting strength in the hope of false national prestige. As soon as the administrative class is turned into a gang of mercantile and laborer men, the whole machinery of government becomes polluted. So here Srila Prabhupada is basically explaining now how do we understand the role and function of all the different varnas. So here we see in the social body, they all are a different part of the social body. I'm not going to go over this because many of you are very familiar with this already. But they all make a different contribution. They make a different contribution because they all value different things. It's very interesting, like for example, if you're in a management meeting and there's problems, then some people in the room will think the problem is because there's not enough Shastra, there's not enough education, there's not enough spirituality. If we solved that, everything would be fine. Clearly, that's a Brahminical person. But then there are some people in the room who say, no, we don't have enough structure, we need more management, we need more systems. Clearly, that's a Kshatriya. Then there are some people in the room who think the problem is that we don't have enough resource, we don't have enough money. Let's build another building. Let's raise this security for the project. Then that will solve the problems. Clearly that's a Vaishya. And there are some people in the room who are seeing the problems and they're just thinking everyone is not working hard enough. Everyone should work harder. Everyone should be more dedicated. Everyone should give more of their time and energy. Then everything will be solved. And which one is right? Probably all of them may have some part of the truth. So it depends on where we're coming from. Of course, someone who's the intelligent class, they should be able to factor all of these things in, and therefore Brahmanas are meant to lead because they're meant to understand that there's value in what each one of them are saying, and then understand what is the priority in any given situation. So all of the different varnas value different things, they make a different contribution, and they fight different things. Sometimes we think only the Kshatriyas are fighting in the Varnashram. Not everyone's fighting. Because Brahmanas are also fighting. They're spiritual warriors. They're fighting ignorance. So they're always teaching to make sure ignorance doesn't become prominent. The Kshatriyas are always fighting to ensure that injustice doesn't become prominent. Vaishyas are always fighting to make sure that there's enough, everyone is maintained nicely. And Sudras fight laziness, lethargy, a lackadaisical approach. Because the nature of society is that things always go down. So people become lazy, people become exploitative, people become deprived of certain things, ignorance of, so then the varnas have to keep fighting to ensure these things don't cover. And like this, they keep society at its optimum. So like this, and then the qualities are there, and the ratios are there. So naturally, in any given society, the leaders, the intelligent class are less. So it's said like this. Of course, it's not set in stone, but for every Brahmana, there will be 4 Kshatriyas. For every Kshatriya, 16 Vaishyas. And for every Vaishya, 100 Sudras. Therefore, in society, for example, there are vox populi, the highest number of people who speak about something win, and they're the loudest. That's dangerous. Because who are the highest number of people? Not necessarily the ones who have the knowledge to be able to guide what's the best thing to do. Or sometimes in society, the people who have the money, or the people who have the position, the people who have the power, they make the decisions. So that's dangerous, because they're not necessarily the best placed. So it's very, very scientific, this Varnashram system. And if it's understood deeply, then it can help to solve many, many problems. I'll just say one final thing. In order for Krishna consciousness, and Varnashram to work, we have to understand the original system. Then we have to be able to identify the principles. Yes, it's very important to understand the 4 Varnas, the 4 ashrams, and the principles behind them, and then understand the current climate within which we're living, and then adjust the details while preserving those principles so that we preserve the system, but in a way that's relevant to the world today. Because if we just try to take a system and just transplant it into the world today without relevant adaptation whilst preserving the essence, then people will feel it to be irrelevant and ineffective. And so that's the challenge of us today. And so here is Yudhishthira, he's going to Bhishma Dev, and he's asking, what is the best way to live? What is dharma? What is the goal of Dharma, the basis of Dharma? And so Bhishma Dev is explaining all these things for his benefit and ultimately for the benefit of generations to come, so that society can go on peacefully but also powerfully towards spiritual self-realization. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to ask. Yeah.
Is there a possibility that the qualities can interlap?
Pardon me? You have to turn it on, Mataji.
Is there a possibility that the qualities can interlap in the, like a Venn diagram, person who could also be, or is it strict that the demarcation of the ashram is this thing, or some qualities can sort of interlap?
Yeah, like you can have a Brahmana who's like a pure Brahmana, but then you can have like a Brahmana Kshatriya, someone who's predominantly a Brahmana but also has some ability to connect with Kshatriya tendencies and factors that into his Brahminical approach to life. So yeah, it's just like the modes.
But not Brahmana Shudra, I'm assuming. No.
Generally not. Generally not. Yeah. So yeah, there's overlap. It's not just so defined like as I was mentioning, like the colors mix, the modes mix. So even it said Brahmanas are in goodness, Kshatriyas are in passion, Vaishyas are in passion, ignorance, Sudras are in ignorance. But then that also. So yeah, it's not black and white. And therefore there needs to be flexibility, there needs to be an approach in which we look at the time, place, circumstance, the individual, and then appropriately apply things.
Yeah. When Shudras are in ignorance mode, the ratio to Brahmana to Shudra is going to be 1:6,400. Is that good or not good? Because Brahmana is going to reduce down the thing.
Well, it's not just 1:6,400, but Shastra says, Kalo Sudra Sambhava. Everyone in Kali Yuga is a Sudra. So it's the age that we're living in that, yes, ignorance has pervaded. When Krishna left the world, Dharma Gnana Dibisaha, Kalo Nasta Drisham Esha, Kali Yuga came, everything became enveloped by darkness. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada said the purpose of this movement is to create Brahmanas, because we need to redress. So yeah, the more Brahmanas there are, the more teachers there are, the more people there are giving light to society, then that redresses the balance. So yes, we need more Brahmanas. Therefore, the USP of the Krishna consciousness movement is to teach, to give knowledge. If you look at the 7 purposes of ISKCON, basically we're meant to be an educational society, because that's what's missing most in the world. Other people are doing things that we can also do, but our unique contribution is we have connection to Bhagavatam, and we can give that, because Puranarko Dhuno Dita, that's the Purana that's going to give light to the world. So yes, that's what we should focus on. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada, he said this is the greatest welfare work, to understand this knowledge, to live this knowledge, and then to share this knowledge, to redress that balance. So every Vaishnava, every Brahmana is like, apparently if you go into outer space and you light a candle, you can see it 12 miles away, because it's so dark that even a small candle can be seen 12 miles away. So every devotee is like a candle in this dark age, giving so much light. So yeah, we need to really value this and take this. Therefore, if you would actually see, I would hazard a guess that Prabhupada's most important project in his whole life was to translate Bhagavatam. Why do I say that? Because here are my arguments. Number 1, it was the project that he did from the very first day of his preaching till the very last moment. Number 2, it was the project that Srila Prabhupada spent the most valuable time of the day on, the early morning. Number 3, it was the project that only when he had completed the first part of it did he feel confident to come to America. Number 4, it was the project that he continually asked devotees to develop, distribute books, publish books from day 1 to the final day. It was the project that Prabhupada said gave him life. And it was the project in which Prabhupada said the best of me is in that project, because Prabhupada said the best of me is in my books. So clearly, yes, this is what we have to do. This is what we're here for.
Prabhuji, one more thing. In under Shudra, qualities, simplicity, loyalty, consistency. I feel that should come under Brahmana, right? And also, in the modern, engineer comes under Shudra. So, I don't know.
Yeah, these qualities are multidimensional, and obviously, but it means that a Sudra, like when they take up a task, when they take up a job, like this is what they will, this is a certain psychology that they work with. So yeah, definitely, others will also have these things, but that's the special, like a Sudra can just take up a task and just do it for their whole life. You meet people like that who have just they just made pots, like a potter for like 40 years, just doing the same thing every day. That's a wonderful thing, actually. So yeah, there is. We have to stop trying to see things as just like boxing it. There is a principle here, there is an emphasis, and then in reality there is overlap and things like that. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, just a question, because I think just now you mentioned about how Brahmanas are mode of goodness, Kshatriyas are...
Just go down to the last slide, just because I'd realized I pressed it here but I didn't show it there. Just to the final thing. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Kshatriyas are more passionate, and then Vaishyas and Sudras are more into mode of ignorance. So I'm just curious, does it mean if you're born in that particular system, you're less, let's say Sudras, you have less tendency to become goodness, something that I'm curious, and then why are Vaishyas and Sudras mode of ignorance? Yeah, that's my question.
When you become a Vaishnava, you actually go beyond these. What does Krishna say? Mamcha yo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityetan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. Krishna says when you actually become a Vaishnava, then sagunan, you go beyond the modes. So sometimes we'll have a devotee who's a Vaishnava who maybe does a Sudra work. But does that mean they're in ignorance? No. They've become a Vaishnava. But it just means that they're still inclined towards the work of a Sudra. That's just a psychophysical. So in the materialistic world, when one has no spiritual consciousness, then generally you will see that these modes connect to these activities. But when one becomes a Vaishnava, you may be attracted to that kind of work, but you go beyond the modes. You should be at least in the goodness, if not beyond. It's interesting, in the Hare Krishna movement, you could be all 4 Varnas in one day. Because in the morning, you could sit on the Vyasasana and give the class, and you're a Brahmana. And during the day, you could go out and distribute books, and all of a sudden, you're like a Vaishya. And then, you could come back and you got to clean the ashram toilets because you're on the rota today, and all of a sudden, you're a Sudra. And in the evening, there could be a meeting, and you're back there in the ISKCON management world as a Kshatriya. Interesting how you could do all of those activities. So, in one sense, as a Vaishnava, you're in one sense transcending, these things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for a nice class. I was wondering you gave us lots of classifications today and lots of different ways of classing things. What makes the 4 varnas and 4 ashrams the best one? Because in logic we can think of things in many, many different ways. We can class them differently. Like nowadays we have the 16 personalities quiz, or the Big 4 quiz, or whatever they're called. Big 5 personality quiz. How do we understand that this is the way to understand things?
Which is the best one?
Yeah.
That depends on you. Right? The best one is the one that helps you to be most peaceful and most productive and most powerful to engage yourself and ultimately transcend the whole system. So, like in the Bhagavatam, you'll hear many times, Brahmacharya is the best. But then in the 3rd canto, you also hear that being a Grihastha is the best, because it's like a safe fort, it said. Kapila says to Devahuti. So which is the best ashram, which is the best varna? Really it depends on you. We could say subjectively, from one perspective, you could say, for example, Brahmacharya is better because there's less complication. But in another way, if someone has certain conditionings, then Grihastha is better because that's ultimately what's going to lead you to transcendence in a powerful way. So ultimately, the best ashram, the best varna is, there is no best varna, because ultimately the purpose of all varnas and ashrams is to become a servant of the Lord. And so it just means that each one of us have to deeply understand our own psychophysical nature and then place ourselves in the right situation.
Yeah, thank you for answering my show. I was just, I think I didn't phrase the question well enough. I was more thinking about there's so many different types of classifications in the modern world. Psychology will classify people in certain ways, and then Bhagavatam.
Okay. So you're saying, what's the best system to understand ourselves?
Right.
Like, should we use modern psychological tests, or should we use? If you actually see, they're talking about the same things. They're not actually that different as well. Like if you look at DISC, are you familiar with DISC? Like dominant, influencer, steady, and what is it? No, is it steady? Caution. Anyway, 4 personality types, or 16personalities.com or things like that. If you actually look closely, or Enneagram or stuff like that, it actually has its roots in Vedic personality. So sometimes those things are useful because they talk in the modern day language that we understand, right? So it can be useful, but ultimately we're drawing on the principles of Shastra. And if sometimes a modern classification or a way of approaching it helps us to understand things, then we can utilize that, right? Like we can employ that in Krishna's service. So I think it's just about understanding the principles of Shastra very strongly. That's always our basis. Tasmad Shastra Pramanam Te. Shastra is always Praman. So that must always be the basis. So we must understand deeply what is a Brahmana, what is a Vaishya, what is a Sudra. Understand those principles. And then if you think that modern day classifications help you to look at it in the context of the world, then using that information, cross-referencing it ultimately with the principles, and that helps, then you can use it. No problem. Even when Rupa Goswami wanted to describe rasa theology, then what did he do? He took the Natya Shastra of Bharata Muni, and he used that classification, which is actually a classification of just materialistic drama. Bharata Muni wrote a Shastra called Natya Shastra, explaining how when you do a drama, how different things will invoke different emotions within the audience. And Rupa Goswami took that kind of blueprint, and then he used it to describe Bhakti Rasa. How in our relationship with Krishna there are Vibhav, Anubhav, Sthayi Bhav, Vyabhicharani Bhav, Sattviki Bhavs, and there are different elements which awaken emotions. So use that classification.